So I will call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order at 6:31 PM on Tuesday, January 18th. And this meeting is being recorded. And the minutes for this meeting will be taken by, I believe, Brittany. Is that correct?
Yes.
Brittany Jones. So welcome, Brittany. And thank you for your service to the committee.
Thank you.
The chair has no matters to bring up that were not anticipated in this agenda. And I open it to any public comment for matters that are not on the agenda. Okay. Hearing none, we will proceed. And our first order of business is a public hearing for a new conduit in Crafts Court. And I need a motion to open the public meeting.
So moved.
Could we open the public hearing rather than meeting?
Public hearing. Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And who is, let's have a roll call vote. Ms. Jakes?
Yes, here.
No, yes, I want to open the public hearing.
Yes, I want to open the public hearing.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison?
Yes, I want to open the public hearing.
Mr. Round?
Yes, I too want to open the public hearing.
Stop it. You,
Very
Mr. Bowling?
accurate.
I would very much like to open the public hearing. Yes, I will vote yes.
The chair votes yes. And I ask if there's a representative from National Grid to state what your request is.
Tabitha Mahaber Sheehy, representing National Grid, 44 River Street, Beverly, Massachusetts. This is to upgrade some older infrastructure at this location for a heavy-duty handhole and for us to put in conduit to serve a customer at that location.
Okay. Any questions of the board?
I have one.
Go ahead, Becky.
Well, couple. When is this to take place? How long will it take? And will there be need for a police detail?
There should not be a need for a police detail. That cul-de-sac only has 2 customers there, the customer being fed and the one across the street from them.
Okay.
The length of time should only be a day, and then they should be able to close up the street.
When is it you're hoping to do this, please?
We're probably looking at 6 weeks out.
Thank you.
So beginning of March.
Yes.
Any other questions from the board?
Nope.
No further questions? Okay, I have a question, which is, you're opening up the street and saying that there's, and putting in conduit and saying that there's only 2 customers on Crafts Court?
There are only 2 customers at the end of Crafts Court. Right now, there's a tee box down there put in ages ago and an existing conduit. They are upgrading their service number 4 and we need to upgrade our infrastructure to serve them.
Okay. But this doesn't have an impact on the other people on Crafts Court, other than the people across the street.
No,
Okay.
I would like to make a correction to what I said earlier. Depending on how far the customer is and whether or not we can get a street opening, and our civil group will probably be dealing with that with your group, with your traffic group, then we will probably do that as soon as possible.
Jeff?
Okay.
finally?
I'm a bit confused by what you just said.
Me
So
too.
you're changing the timeline to be as soon as possible?
Well, that all depends on where the customer stands presently with their service and when our civil group will go out there. Typically, it's 6 weeks. I'm just saying that that all depends on your traffic people and whether or not they give the permit to open the street.
That's not through traffic, that's through DPW.
Okay, DPW.
And just a word on that, Jeff, if I may. So Chuck is willing to work with Grid and to anticipate if there's a window that weather would allow earlier through his curb cut permitting process that he would request that you require, that he could work with National Grid and see if there's a date sooner that might work. It's really weather dependent. If there's a forecast for a couple of good days, then he'd be willing for them to come in. I know that the homeowner is quite anxious to have the work done, and they missed the fall opportunity, and it's a pretty small project all in all.
Okay,
One other question, Jeff, if I may.
go ahead, John.
It affects only one other homeowner, I guess the cul-de-sac, so that's not a major concern, but can that homeowner get in and out of his or her driveway when you've got the street open? And if not, will you make arrangements such that that person can have their vehicles out and beyond the excavation area, if that's the case?
Yes, our civil group will make sure of that.
Okay.
Jeff,
Yes,
so I do have a question now. So if the work is done immediately and you're opening the street, will you be closing it back up with cold patch or hot patch, or what will you be doing, given that it's the middle of the winter?
Probably with hot patch for now. If they have to come back in the spring, they will.
does that answer your question, Eli?
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions from the board? I take a motion to close the public hearing. Excuse me, let me ask the question of the public. Is there anybody in the public that would like to say something about this? Okay, I'll take a motion from the board to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, moved by Ms. Jakes and seconded by Mr. Round. Roll call vote. Mr. Round,
yes.
Mr. Bowling,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes,
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
chair votes yes. Now we need to vote on whether we approve this request. for street opening at 4 Crafts Court, or near 4 Crafts Court, to upgrade infrastructure for the electrical service in a new project, house projects that's there.
I will make a motion that we approve National Grid's request number 303-69219 on Crafts Court for replacement of the existing T-box with a heavy-duty handhold and installing conduit, with the provision that they return the road to as good or better condition than when they left it, returning in the spring if need be to effect that repair.
Second. Did anybody hear me?
I heard you. Seconded by Becky.
Thank you.
I'd like to suggest that we amend that motion to include applying through the Department of Public Works, Chuck Dam, for the street opening permit.
That would normally be done anyway.
Normal or not, we're making it part of our motion.
Okay,
Should we also include, either in this motion or in another, our willingness to let Chuck Dam work with them to find a weather window? I thought Greg had mentioned something like that.
I don't think that's necessary as part of the motion.
I think that gets done through his issuance of the opening permit.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Sam.
Mhm.
Okay, Eli, is that okay with you, that the addition that I suggested is in the motion?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Brittany, you following all this?
Yes.
Okay. So I will take a vote on the main motion. Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes,
Mr. Round,
Yes.
the chair votes yes. So that's an approval of your request, working through Chuck Dam and Department of Public Works for the final issuance of the opening permit.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the second item on our agenda is the Water Resources Protection Task Force interviews. We have 4 candidates who have indicated an interest in the at-large membership on this committee, on the task force. And that's out of 6 seats for at-large members. I just want to say tonight, we're doing interviews only. We are not going to be appointing. We have other candidates who are in the works, getting their information into to be interviewed, and we will be conducting interviews and appointments at our February 7th meeting. Thank you, Greg. Okay, so take them in the order that they came to us. We'll start with Ron Parker. Ron, I understand you have another appointment at 7 o'clock, so are you there?
Yes. Yes, I'm here. Thank you for accommodating me.
Okay. Do you understand what the Water Resources Protection Task Force is?
From the description posted by the board, I have no additional data.
Okay. We did post a description, and Mr. Fetishville has put at least one, I think maybe two articles about this task force into the Cricket. Just so you're aware, the task force as a whole will be meeting at least 3 times, once at least at the beginning, once in the middle, and once towards the end of the 12 to 18 months that this is expected to run. There'll be work for task force members in between that time, but most of the work will be done by a working group under the guidance of the chair of Concom, Steve Kang. And that this arises from a task force that was set up by town meeting in 1989 and delivered a report to town meeting in 1990 about our water resources. And that report will be the basis for review and updating as part of this task force charge. There's more detail than that we can send out, and will send out to you about what the expectations are and what the questions are that the task force will be addressing. But in terms of time commitments, there's very specific time commitments for board meeting, for task force meetings, a minimum of 3 over the next year and a half, potentially many more than that. In fact, Steve was talking about doing one as soon as we are done in early February with our appointments. Okay. So tell us a little bit about your background and why you think you would make a good member for this particular task force.
I'm a technologist. My education was a baccalaureate in electrical engineering, later a master's degree in computer science. I've worked in technology leadership all my career. I was chief technology officer at Firm Networks, a Massachusetts company that was acquired by Microsoft in 2020. And I'm now a technology leader in Microsoft, running a small advanced engineering and technology evaluation group. I have an interest in science and environmental science. I would not say I have any particular expertise in that area, but I believe that I can apply my engineering skills and discipline to evaluating data, looking at solutions, managing a process. So I'm interested. I feel my basic skills are well suited. My experience is well suited. But like I said, I do not have any specific experience in hydrology or environmental science.
Okay. That's a hopeful, but not a requirement. The last reference that you made. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a question, Jeff, if I may, of Ron.
Okay, go ahead.
Ron, you there? Yes, you
I
are.
am here. Yes.
Okay, good. Good. Thanks for volunteering for this slot. I think there's going to be a good deal of work that's going to have to be done, and with regard to not just the task force, but there'll be various working groups that'll be carved out of that force, and it's quite possible that you'll be involved. The fact that you're volunteering certainly is a level of enthusiasm and interest. I'm just curious, a couple of things. Have you been involved in volunteer boards, in nonprofits, or in the public sphere before? You're a fairly new resident to this town, and is this kind of a new chapter in your life?
It is, yeah. So I moved to town 2020, so I've never been here other than pandemic. And I've thought for a while I'd like to try my hand at some form of community service, and this opportunity showed itself and kind of caught my interest.
Well, that's great. No, we thank you very much for your volunteering for this slot, and we'll see what happens next week. But I'm looking forward to your being a participant.
Thank you.
Becky?
Hi, Ron. Welcome to town, and thank you very much for tossing your hat in the ring. I guess we're not really entirely sure the time that'll be required, and I just want to make sure that whatever that is, you'll be able to have the time to put into it. I don't think it'll be onerous.
Yeah, good question, and something I considered. I am full-time employed. My job can be challenging at times, but it also tends to be fairly regular hours, and my evenings are typically to myself, and I am interested, motivated, so I don't believe that should pose any problems.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions from the board? I have one question for you, Ron, and that is, if meetings were held on Zoom, would you be available for late afternoon meetings as well?
I can't guarantee that. There would be times my schedule is typically not completely packed all hours of the day, but it would be difficult for me to say unconditionally yes.
Okay. That's good. That's good for the board to know. Okay. If there are no further questions, I think we got you out of here before your 7 o'clock meeting. Thank you for your interest and your enthusiasm, and we will revisit this on February 7th and be making appointments that night. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so the next candidate that I have is Gordon Turner. And looking, and so there he is. Hi, Gordon. Welcome. And you, I hope, heard my little spiel about the committee and how it's organized. There's a lot of work that this committee will be doing, and a lot of it will be done by the so-called working group. And your participation can be at both the task force level as the member that you're applying, membership for which you're applying tonight, and it could also be to the degree that you're available in the task force working group. Working groups. There are going to be subgroups that are going to be working on tasks. Okay, there's a lot of planning that's going into this. So if you could share with us a little bit about your background and why you're interested in this particular service opportunity.
Sure thing. I'm a chemist by, I guess, training or education. I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a PhD in chemistry. And I work at a pharmaceutical company, Novartis, for the last 16 years, where I don't really do chemistry anymore, but data science related work related to finding new medicines for heart disease. But I have a strong scientific background, I think, a real molecular understanding of the types of things I work on, and I think that may be useful looking at the water supply and the various threats that it faces.
I'm smiling at your use of molecular.
Okay.
That did not go unnoticed. That's great. Let me ask if the board has any questions for you. Becky?
Again, Gordon, thank you very much. And boy, you're quite a CV. Thank you for offering up some time. And that is the question. Do you have time constraints that might preclude you from meetings?
Again, I work full-time job, but evenings and weekends are available. So I think I can spend some time working on this project.
Great, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Questions from other board members?
Yeah. Mr. Turner, thanks for volunteering. Could you go a little bit into your understanding, if you've looked into the issue of the Water Resources Committee in town, or task force, could you go into a little bit into your understanding of the history and your motivations for joining this task force?
Sure. Most of what I know is from the postings that have been made. I understand there was a report from the 1990 task force. I haven't been able to find that online yet. I don't know if it's available to review. I have in the past read a little bit about the different water supply sources for the town. There was a nice documentary put together last year about the brook and where the water sources are from in the town. So I found that interesting. And, I'm concerned about climate change and the changes that it's going to make us face. So I think it's something that needs to be looked at. I'd be happy to help if I can be of help for that. So that's sort of my motivation.
Questions from other board members?
So we will be putting the Horsley Witten report on the website soon, sometime this week,
Okay,
as
great.
well as some additional background on the task force initial information. So we will get that up and available. It was too big the report is too big to email. It's too big of a file. So
Okay.
we'll certainly get it out.
Okay, that's a great question about the access to the report. Any other questions or comments for Gordon? Okay.
All right.
Thank you for coming in tonight. And it's a very brief process. And we will be reviewing all of our applicants, as I said, on February 7th, and make our decision and appoint people then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person that we need to talk to, and this person is going to require substantial vetting, is Tom Keogh.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Mr. Chairman.
As always, Tom. We thank you for, you just couldn't stay away, could you?
Well, the last 2-year appointment I took went for almost 3 years plus. So I figured that was, I had to check with Greg to make sure that this was only 12 to 18 months. But in looking at the report from 1990 that I got from Steve Gang, it's 148 pages. So that may take me a couple weeks just to read that, but it is significant and has a lot of information in it.
It is that. So why are you throwing yourself into the fray again, Mr. Keogh?
Well,
For those who are online who don't know, this gentleman and Sue Thorne headed up the 375th celebration for the town, which was interrupted by some virus.
And have both been on the Board of Selectmen and.
So why are you throwing yourself into the
Well,
fray?
first of all, prior to my time on the Board of Selectmen, I was a science teacher. And one of the things that we taught to 8th graders was water quality. And so that gives me a little bit of information in that, but it's certainly nothing compared to the water quality testing that we need to look at, that's done by Weston and Sampson, and anything that happens coming out of the water treatment plant. I am available. I believe that I can work with a group of people to be able to look at data, research data, and then come have some discussion about that. And then after the discussion, come up with some conclusions and recommendations that we would make to the town. I believe that I can provide leadership to smaller groups. It was not my intent to become the co-chair of the 375th, but I did, and I think the results were successful. I'm an organized person. I understand how to work within the, say, the confines of the open meeting law to make sure that nothing happens at a meeting that would get any people in that meeting in trouble. So I am here to say, I'm putting my hat in the ring and would like to be considered for a position on the task force.
Your understatement about the 375th celebration being successful is noted.
Thank you.
Any questions, any other questions from board members? Ms. Jakes?
Hello again, Tom.
Hi, Becky.
Well, just the usual. Do you have time to put into this? And are you really serious? Just kidding. Thank you. You're so, I know, Tom. Thank you.
I have time to put into it. I do have some volunteer time with the Boy Scouts also. But I certainly be available during the evenings or during the early afternoons or at any time to have a meeting. My main goal would be that many of the meetings would be scheduled ahead of time and some kind of schedule, and people, whoever they are, who are on the task force, will be able to set time aside for that.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Jeff, if I may.
Go ahead, John.
Tom, thanks for volunteering. It's wonderful that you can find time to pick and choose the spots where you want to contribute. The only observation I would make is that you indicated that the 375th went a little bit longer than expected. I know that your tenure as a selectman was a very long time. I don't think that necessarily was the time frame that you planned that. And for this particular committee, you never know. You mentioned a year to 18 months, but well, we'll see what happens. It may not be COVID, but we hope that we can finish this program on time.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Ann. You're welcome.
Tom, are there any particular areas around the water resources in town that you personally have concerns about?
Oh, well, I had sent a quick email to Steve Gang the other day, and I said, one thing that we'll have a group of people coming together on this task force, and they may not all have the same basic understanding and knowledge of the water resources. So I suggested to Steve that once, one of the opening meetings might involve getting everybody on the committee to go up to the water treatment plant up at Gravelly Pond and look at Gravelly Pond and Round Pond, go to the Lincoln Street well, and even visit the wastewater treatment plant so they understand those three facilities being so important in terms of two of the main goals of a community, and that is supplying potable water to as many people who want to sign up for it, and then getting rid of wastewater. And the interconnection of the potable water and the wastewater is pretty important, and the way that the pipes go. And I know that the members of the board have spent time when I was on the board and your board now, and spend a lot of time putting money into the budget so we can keep replacing the supply pipes and the sewer pipes, just to keep that going. That's not the only thing we need to think about, but I think that's important that people understand, you know, where these facilities are in town and what they do.
Thank you, Tom.
Tom, are you aware of the PFAS testing that has been reported here and in other channels by Department of Public Works?
I have not looked into that right yet. No, I have not looked at that. I've got that as a note here on my slip, but
yeah,
but I haven't spent some time on that yet.
Yeah, that's certainly going to be part of the concerns that are going to need to be addressed by this task force. And it's challenging to address because of how they get there and the fact that they don't go away.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Jeff.
As
Thanks, members of the board.
always, it's wonderful to see you here at our meeting. And thank you again for all the time and service that you've given to the town.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our last candidate is Joe Sabella. And Joe? Are you here? I see your name. Joe, I think you need to unmute. Mr. Sabella. Well, that's interesting. Joe is muted. His name has been there since we started our meeting. And I'm not hearing him.
Okay, I'm here.
That's better.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe.
Yes.
I don't know how much of the discussion that you've heard so far.
I've heard all of it, yes.
Okay. And I think that I would like you to share with the selectmen what your particular interest is in this committee and why you would like to be a member of the task force.
All right, good evening to all of the Board of Selectmen, ladies and gentlemen. And I've been a resident of this community for 48 years, and I'm one of the founding fathers of the CPA, whose mainstay was to protect our water supply. We started our efforts in 1999, and I'm still a current member of the CPA. And I have a very close relationship with Steve Gang, the chairman of the group that he represents, the Concom. And in water preservation, I've been involved with brook clearing, and I'm also a yearly participant of having our water tested with the DPW and Chuck Dam. So I currently, I'm retired. I have much time to devote to the committee if chosen. And I'm currently a member of 3 other committees, which, pertain to the town: Historic District Commission, the CPA, and Friends of Manchester Trees. So really, I look at water as a very important commodity of our community, and I'd like to be considered for this position. Thank you.
Board members, any questions? Ms. Jakes?
Hi, Joe. You actually answered my question, which was going to be the time constraints.
Yeah.
And I just thank you so much for the time you do give to the town, and the understanding you have of the history of the CPC, CPA, and water resources. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you, Ms. Jakes.
Jeff, if I may.
Go ahead, John.
Yes, Joe. And I also want to thank you for volunteering. I think it's in your blood because you're active in town here and have great perspective because you've been around for so long. And I know that you've had some interest with regard to water in particular, have had concerns about the brook and its maintenance, et cetera. Can you elaborate a little bit on what particular aspects, I think, of this whole water initiative that would be particularly of interest to you?
Well, of interest to me, John, is protecting our water supply from infiltration, from land development, and really, I've watched a lot of that going on. I'm very involved. My wife is a graduate of Gordon College, and I'm very closely involved with Gordon College to try to have them turn around their thinking against our water supply on Gravelly Pond. So that's a real concern to me as far as development and anything that goes on around that. So I'm really in touch with Helen Bethel to see what her group of trustees is doing to protect our water supply. So I'm really involved with a lot of different groups to just make sure that their efforts are really looked at and thought of by Gordon College and surrounding developers and communities.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Jeff, if I may.
Go ahead.
Joe, what familiarity do you have with the previous report, and can you mention anything from that report that has been done that is of value to our water resources?
I'm not 100% read the text in full, but I look at what has been said, and I agree that things need to be worked on and updated constantly. Really, in working with my Historic District Commission, different things also come up at every turn. And with this committee, if chosen, everything needs to be looked at and to be investigated. And we as a group, I'm involved with the 3 groups right now, and asking each chair to delegate certain responsibilities to the committee members so that the chairman is not overwhelmed. And if chosen for this committee, I would ask the same to be done so we could all share in what's going on.
Joe, you understand that
Thank
there's
you.
Thank you. Ann.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Ann. You understand that there's two levels of participation in this committee. One is to work on specific tasks that are short-ranged, and the second is the overall process of overseeing the work of the working group.
Yes,
And-
Jeff, I'm aware of that, and I'm definitely willing to do that and, learn from my team members what has to be done and other people to contribute to success of the committee and go from there.
Okay. Okay. And that's a different type of participation than what we've been talking about tonight in terms of the task force membership.
Okay.
Any other questions for Joe?
Yeah. Joe, you mentioned in your opening remarks that you worked with the DPW director on some of the water testing in town. Could you go into a little bit more detail on that?
Yes, every year, the DPW drops off for me to have a water sample done in the early morning hours to submit to the town. Of all my years in this town that I have participated in the water testing, everything has come back negative as far as, above level, including this year. And I just recently sent for Chuck Dam to send me the facts of this year's water testing, which I have. So I continue to do that and will continue to participate in that for the water testing.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, are you aware of PFAs in our water supply?
Not 100%, Jeff, but I have the 148-page report. I'm probably about a quarter of the way through that, but if it's in that 148 report, hopefully that will come up and I will contact the water department if it's not, to expound on what you just have stated.
Okay. PFAs will not show up in that report. In
Okay.
the Horsley-Witten report of 1990. They're a relatively recent concern in municipal water supplies and domestic water supplies that people have through well water. They're called forever chemicals. And there's about 3,000 of them or more, and they don't break down is the problem. 6 of them are tested in Massachusetts, which has one of the more rigorous testing protocols in the country. And our testing was recently done. It should be, if you have access to the most recent water report that Chuck has put up, I think it's on the website. It indicates where we are with the PFAs. And I think 2 of them showed up in the range of concern and need to be followed, which is less than 20 parts. It's not per million, it's even more than that. 20 parts per billion, Greg? Yeah. Anyway, if you have access to that report, you should pay particular attention to the PFAs.
And Jeff, that was the Whitmer report?
No,
What was it again?
the Horsley-Witten report is the first report that was done in 1990, and it's going to be the basis of the task force work in terms of reviewing what their recommendations were, but they're going to go beyond that.
Okay.
Greg, did you want to add to what I was just saying?
Just clarifying, it's parts per trillion.
Parts per trillion. Thank you.
Yes.
I wanted to go there, but trillion is such a big number.
It's a big number.
And if the test results show up in the range of 10 to 20 parts per trillion, that's a cause for concern and monitoring. If it goes over 20, then we need to continuously test and perhaps be doing remediation. Okay. If there are no other questions for Joe? Joe, I thank you for coming tonight and putting in your application for this task force. As I said, we will be looking at all of our applicants on February 7th and make a decision. We're looking for 6 people at large. So thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to all of your select.
Thank you, Joe.
Before we move off of the Water Resources Protection Task Force, I did want to see if we could affirm members of the task force who have been nominated by their respective committees. We've done this for the Board of Selectmen, and John Round is our member and Ann Harrison is our alternate. We have tonight 3 members of the Concom who will be members, who have been nominated by the membership of Concom. We have, last meeting, we took care of Planning Board with Ron Mastro Giacomo and Sarah Creighton. I don't believe we talked about Board of Health. We have 1 member from the Board of Health who's been nominated, Peter Colarusso. And we have members from the Stream Team and the OSCR, the Open Space and, excuse me, OSRC, Open Space and Recreation Committee, who have been brought forth by their boards. Now I just need to grab the names of those people. And that would include Helen Bethel, Olga Hayes for Open Space and Recreation, and Jennifer Lamoth and Francie Caudle from the Stream Team. They have been nominated by their committees. So if I could get a nomination, recommendation for their appointment from our board tonight, that will start to fill out the committee membership on the task force.
Jeff, this wasn't explicitly, I know we've had this list before in a previous packet, but the list that you just gave wasn't explicitly written down in the packet, and I missed some of the specific committees that people were from. So could you, before we vote on that, could you go through the list of committees again, who's, and specifically the names of the people from each of those committees that you're asking us to approve tonight?
Yes. In fact, if you give me 1 second, I will put it up on the screen. Okay, let's. Okay, so the committees are Concom, and they have nominated Steve Gang, David Lumsden, and Ashley Oakes. OSO, this is a mistake in my typing on this. Open Space and Recreation Planning Committee, Helen Bethel and Olga Hayes. And Olga is actually nominated as the alternate. So she should be over here. We did Planning Board last time. We did Peter Colarusso, I believe, last time. For the stream team, it's Jessica Lamoth, and Francie Caudell. So
For what little it's worth, I'm also an alternate.
to you, that's worth a lot. Sorry, Ann. Okay. So the ones that we would be voting on tonight would be those from Concom, Open Space, and Stream Team. All the others have been confirmed.
I move to confirm the appointment of Steve Gang, David Lumsden, and Ashley Oakes from the Concom, Helen Bethel and Olga Hayes from the Open Source and Recreation Committee, Olga being the alternate, Jessica Lamont as the main representative from the Stream Team, with Francis Caudell as the alternate. All of these to serve on the Water Resources Protection Task Force.
Second.
Are we doing Concom with that as well, I thought?
Yes, she put Concom in her motion.
Well, there we go. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Bowling,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bodmer Turner votes yes. Okay, so that sets up all the appointments except for the alternate from the Board of Health and the at-large members, 4 of which we've interviewed tonight, and there may be more at-large members next time. I don't think that the board needs to appoint the town employee for planning and the town employee for project management that are part of the committee structure. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we will move on. The next item on our agenda is a discussion of standards for service and reliability for dispatch. This item comes from via request from Ann Harrison to spend some time discussing performance standards regardless of where dispatch is housed. So, Ann, do you want to tee this up?
Sure. One thing that I would like to see is that dispatch have emergency power There currently is a generator for the town. It is beside the lower entrance to the police station, surrounded by sandbags. I think there is a danger that if there were a serious storm from a bad direction, sandbags would not be enough to protect the generator, and that would shut down dispatch completely in an emergency. So that's one thing I'm concerned about. A second is that the new CAD system advertises itself as being software as a service. That may be a slightly technical term. What it means is that the software runs at a central location and you connect to it with the internet. I don't know whether any of you noticed, but we recently lost the internet for quite a while during the last storm. I don't know in detail what parts of dispatch could operate without connection to the central server. But I think we need to know that. The next question I have is about the security of the dispatch center location in Town Hall. It's heavily armored in front, and there's a side window which is often open in the summer. And I think that puts the town at risk of somebody tossing something in the window. I understand that room could be hot in the summer, but I think these are things that we need to address. My understanding is that the center in Middleton has 4 connections, 4 separate providers that can connect to the central server for the CAD system, their CAD systems, an internet, a microwave link, and I don't know what the other 2 are. But wherever we have site our dispatch, I think those 3 issues need to be addressed. If anybody else has, I welcome comments that other people have. One other thought that I had was the time that it takes in an emergency. Obviously at Middleton, there's somebody there as backup. When Chief Fitzgerald reported that it took more than 10 minutes to get somebody in, thinking maybe we need to have something like a standby list where people would be assigned to be available, even for a call in the middle of the night. And I'm sure there are other issues, but those are the ones that concern me.
Okay. Any comments on the issue of internet connectivity or network connectivity for the dispatch center, building security, or other issues related to
Backup power.
backup power? Thank you. And other issues any other issues related to standards for what we expect out of our dispatch, what we're looking for dispatch.
So we do have on our capital plan the replacement of the generator, the larger generator that would power all of Town Hall, and also get it on higher ground. I have to double check when that is. It's either, I think it's 2 years out is when that was planned.
Okay.
Why is that, has not that not been an issue? Why is that not? Obviously from the sandbags, somebody knows that that place is at risk. Why hasn't it been addressed? Why is it still 2 years out?
It's all just juggling priorities.
So dispatch isn't, no, I'm not going to say that. That'd be rude.
There's lots of competing needs all around.
So in general, I would say that I agree that we need to have a more comprehensive list of what we would actually need to do to build out and maintain dispatch, which is, if we're doing it here, comparable to what we would get elsewhere if we're going to do an adequate comparison. And I think most of the points that Ann raised are certainly worth following up on.
Jeff, I would agree. All these points that Ann makes are solid ones, especially about the generator and about the different carriers. I'm still not clear about all of that connectivity and how it works. But needless to say, you've got to have power for whatever you're going to be doing there. And if power is going to be a problem, given the way the generator sits right now, in general, that's a time when you're going to have more people calling in with more issues, because it's probably a difficult weather time, given the certainly so far as water is concerned. So I need a little more clarification on these different carriers, microwave versus, I don't know, all of the other various connections. And it may be that the report that we get from the regional group, which is when, I guess, sometime in the early to mid-February, will kind of provide somewhat of a guide as to what issues do we not know that we shouldn't be concerned about, that we will see from that report. But right now, the generator and this having more than one way of connection is particularly important to me.
John, I think that what Ann's suggesting, and which I really support, is setting some guidelines that the Board of Selectmen would like to see. And we could set a guideline of redundancy in connectivity to the internet. The generator issue is a different issue than connectivity, although they're certainly related, because you could have power and no internet connection, depending on how the internet connection was set up. But I think and Ann, you can clarify this, what Ann's suggesting is that we set some guidelines of how many redundancies in terms of internet connection do we want to see. So Becky, I saw your hand, but let me ask Ann to respond to that, and then I'll come back to you, Beck.
I think you said, Greg, that you were going to be talking with the people in Middleton and would ask them about the reliance on a central server. What services would we lose if we were not connected to the internet? How much could we successfully dispatch?
So you would still be able to dispatch. You would lose some of your computer-aided location capabilities. So the automatic pop up on the screen for location where the phone call was coming from may not function because of that being internet dependent. GPS function.
That would be a problem if someone was in severe distress and called and wasn't able to identify themselves and their location.
Correct.
As to the number, I don't have a good answer for that. I think we need to have something other than just Comcast, because Comcast goes out. And presumably if we have power, we could run a microwave link. And I would have to contact, I'm sure the people in Middleton could tell us what their other sources of connectivity are, but
So they have the fiber, and then they have, I believe, the microwave, and then they have 2 cellular internet connections.
okay. If we could find a way of getting another cellular internet, that would probably be adequate and wouldn't get us in the problem of maintaining our own microwave link with the supplier of the service.
I'd like to step back from being really specific and think about this in terms of what kinds of backup do we think that we need?
The kind of backup is pretty specific. I think I would be content just saying that we need an alternative to Comcast.
I'm sorry, Ann, I contradicted myself. What I meant was, how many alternatives of backup do we believe that we should have? Is 2 enough? Should there be 3? So that's a standard or a policy or a guideline that we would grasp for, and then how that gets implemented would be a further discussion. But do we think that we need to have multiple redundancies to back it up?
So, historical comment.
Go ahead.
The last time that we looked at the Middleton rec, if I recall correctly, as a condition of joining, they were going to require that we had 2 methods of communication to them. One through land connection of some sort, and the other one could be, whatever we want. We were looking at microwave or some other radio solution. But I believe back then that the number was 2, and it was a requirement of the rec.
Okay. Now, I've had some hands go up and go down. Becky, you had your hand up before. Did you want to make a comment? And then I'm going to recognize the 2 chiefs.
Some of what I was going to ask, I got some information on, but I'd like to hear from the chiefs before I say anything or ask anything more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chief Cleary, you're first up.
Good evening, thank you. While you're on the topic, I would just suggest, and I believe you folks have all the information of using the APCO dispatch center guidelines as well as the NFPA 1221 standards, which might guide you or might provide a framework for you to pick the choices from with respect to redundancies and backup and building safety and different things like that, because those are the recognized standards. So that might be a good place to start and review and then draw from there. But that I just point you to those.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Fitzgerald.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of comments. The generator and the building security, I think, needs to be addressed no matter if we stay in-house or if we go to the regional. That's one of the generator has been a actual concern of mine for, close to 30 years since it's been put there. The 911 line, I believe, has its own internet connection through the state, so it's not on the town's, the the town's server, so to speak. So I think we'd have to get some clarification on the backup with that through the state. And our new phone system, our regular business lines are already on a cellular backup. And Eli took my comment in regards to, if we were to join the rec, the redundancy of the two ways to communicate. So that was just my point of clarification.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
No.
Becky?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Is there a way to get the generator moved from 2 years to, say, this year? It just
The
seems like-
short answer is yes. It's all about the choices you want to make in your budget. So yes, that can be done.
Dispatch is pretty central to the safety of the town. And the police department spends money on, beach buggies. Why aren't we protecting dispatch?
Becky?
My question is kind of to what Ann's saying, but my concern with replacing the generator is where would it be located? Because we just had pretty high tide. And if we're going to replace the generator imminently, it would have to be somewhere else. I mean, how high did it come up the water to town hall during this last storm?
Yeah, it didn't reach town hall itself, but anyways, the location is just on the other side of that retaining wall. That's another 6 feet up, 8 feet up.
And that's where it would go?
Most likely. I mean, it's not going to be, it'll be more visible from Main Street, but we can put some sort of plantings or fence around it.
Well, as long as it's not where it is right now. I do agree with Ann that I think that that's something that is pretty crucial. I think we have a lot of pretty crucial things that we're looking at for this budget 2023. But if we're going to do that, it has to be something that is in a proper location, and hopefully that we can move if need be.
If I may, perhaps in the interim, some more solid protection could be put around the existing generator. Like a retaining wall around it. That doesn't require that we replace the whole thing in order to make sure that there is power.
Okay. Any other comments or questions about this issue? Okay. We will revisit this. I'd like a chance to more carefully review the standards for both fire and police that Chief Cleary just referenced. But the next item on our agenda is a review of selectmen policies. My understanding is that Ian and Greg and Eli met and updated the document that Ann has created with the side-by-side view for us to look at. Ann, do you want to take us off on this one?
Sure, let's start with the first thing. The first policy is procedures for reporting accidents. It covers specifically paid employees, not those of us who are employees without. And our feeling was that that should be part of the personnel policies, and that Greg would find time in his copious free time, which I don't think exists, to write such a policy for anyone who's working for the town. Screen, of course. The next, is there discussion of that?
Ann, can you put up, if I let you share screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
In
can you-
theory,
Well, in practice,
let's.
hang on
Never
a
done
second.
this. Okay. Let's see if I can- Yes. Okay, where do I look for?
You're going to be seeing it in just a minute.
Okay,
Okay. If you go down to the,
yep,
or maybe on your screen at the top, or at the bottom, a green arrow that says share screen.
share screen, got it.
And just so you know, you should have the document open in
Mhm.
front of you, and you'll see a pop-up window, and in the pop-up window, you need to select the frame that the
Mhm.
window that is that window.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see if I could find a way of. Okay. Okay. Is,
Can you hide this format bar?
yeah, sure. Hmm. That I could, well, I could certainly. Maybe. I can certainly increase the size of it. I think it will waste everybody's time if I try and get rid of the format bar without understanding how I'm doing it. But is that large enough to be for people to read?
That's fine. You also, yeah, go ahead, Drake.
I was just gonna say, just while we're getting situated here, Andrea Mainville, our accountant finance director who handles the accident reporting process, is working on a draft for us that we'll put into the personnel policy.
Okay, so this is on 87.1.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, so what you need from us then is a an agreement that that's the way we want to proceed.
Yes.
Okay. Take a motion to delete policy 87-1 and replace it with an employee personnel policy that addresses the issues of insurance claims and accidents.
So
Uh,
I think that technically what we need to do is make a motion to put this on the agenda for the next meeting. This has to be done in 2 phases. We can't delete it tonight. Because our existing policies have us treating this as a change to a policy. So we have to essentially hold a second reading for the change.
I understand, Eli, but to do that, don't we have to make a motion to change the policy tonight, knowing that we have to affirm that at our next meeting?
Okay, sure. I'll go with that.
Isn't that the way that the process goes?
Yes, although actually I have not actually modified a policy before, so we always just pose them for first readings.
Yes. Okay.
Isn't that under the policy 88-1 appendix A? Isn't that the time frame for that?
Yep.
We're
Yes.
talking about.
Yes.
And in
that
fact,
You want
88,
to scroll down? You want to scroll down to 88-1?
Yeah, sure.
Please. Yep. You just.
Yeah. Right there starts.
Okay, so the existing policy. Need to go
part
to the
that
top.
you're
Of the, need to go to the top of the page. No, the top of the previous page. Right there. Okay, keep going.
Mhm.
Policies shall be submitted. This is all for a new policy. Policy or policy revisions considered by the board shall not be adopted at the meeting at which they are introduced, but shall require a second reading at a subsequent meeting before adoption is considered. Okay, so if we're going to do things tonight, what we could do is we could move policy 87-1. We're just trying to get our act together here in terms of these reviews.
Mhm.
To a second hearing.
Mhm.
Or we could just put in the language following a second hearing. However you want to frame the motion, but I think we need to make a motion that we're going to go down this path.
I move that for a first reading, we propose revoking policy 87-1 and replacing it with a personnel policy to be developed.
Second.
Does that work, Eli?
Yep.
Okay, so is there further discussion of this? Because if we're going to get through these, we're going to need to move.
Mhm.
My grasp of the meeting is that the consensus of the board was to adopt this. Okay, so we're going to go to a second reading on 87-1.
Okay.
Vote. Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Bottom Turner votes yes. Okay, so this is changing the name of the policy.
I did have a question where it says that that these recordings will be kept in town hall in an electronic archive and be available, well, permanently, and be available to the public. Do we need to state that while they're available to the public, you know, there is a time frame and possible cost for they can't just walk into the town hall and say, I want to see this right now. Takes a little time and might be a cost with that. Is that correct or no?
Yeah, I believe it's just covered by public records law.
Do we need to include that this subject to public records accessibility laws and which, like, state public records accessibility laws?
So that's a good question for council that we can confer.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question about this, but I want to take other board members' questions first, or comments.
Yeah, I've got a question, Jeff, just really in kind of like the first line, both voice and video. Now, some of these committee meetings will be video voice, but some of these recordings may be just voice, correct? I think going forward, there'll be some meetings there'll be a recording, but they will not be a video necessarily. I just want to make sure that that's the understanding of the way it's worded there.
Don't we have capabilities in both the rooms upstairs at town hall now, Greg, for televising?
Yeah, video record.
Yep.
I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
so
well,
there's-
you never know when
Yeah.
technology is going to be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't make it all boards, but those boards that have independent judiciary capability. And I think audio and audio is very hard to follow if you're not familiar with everybody's voice. And the ability to do a video recording of a meeting is pretty readily available.
This is a fundamental change in record keeping for the town. Our fundamental document has been the written minutes, which are fairly readily retrievable.
Well,
And I wonder about the need to maintain an archive of multi-gigabyte 4-hour meetings permanently. Permanently is a long time.
Jeff, if I may, there was discussion about this and what is the actual legal document. This was discussed with town council and referred from the state as well. And that while a verbatim meeting is not what's legally obligated to be on record, it is, that's why the minutes are the legal record.
I understand that. The question is whether we want to make the fundamental shift, because minutes are kept in perpetuity.
I'm just saying, if we're going to be consistent with the state guidelines, that I wonder if we actually keep both video and audio permanently. I think this needs to be done in accordance with what the state guidelines are. That's my feeling.
There isn't a state guideline that says you can't do more than minutes. And we are suggesting doing more than minutes. The minutes are in fact the official record. And as for the terabytes of data, storage media are so cheap at this point. It's not a question of either money or space to maintain these records.
And if it becomes a matter of money and space, then the subsequent board could modify the policy to put a time limit on it.
I guess I don't see the need to go beyond 1 year and have the minutes be what exists in perpetuity.
It costs more to get rid of the stuff than it does to maintain it.
Yeah, it's true. That's probably true.
How is that true?
Because you have to go and locate, eliminate, and recycle the archival storage.
Which you're going to have to do if there's a public records request.
Well,
I mean, are we setting up a very costly thing to do that's unnecessary? The town's operated for hundreds of years on minutes. And what's the advantage of having this kind of record keeping? I mean, I don't know how many of you have ever gone back and looked at a 4 or 5 hour Board of Selectmen meeting. I have, trying to find information in it that hadn't been posted in the minutes at that point. And it's fairly easy right now because they're on the web, but they're not going to stay there. I very seriously question whether this level of data keeping is necessary. It's microscopic, and keeping data just for the sake of keeping data is something that I don't see as something that's, dictated by our role in record keeping for the town.
I agree with Jeff.
I mean, if there's an issue of negligence that needs to be addressed and you want to have that document exist, that video document exist for 3 years, which is the end of professional negligence, then maybe it could be a 3-year period. But I don't see keeping it in perpetuity. I mean, think about what you're asking.
What I think is that will be a significant, much more of a burden on the town hall employees to have to go through and throw out things every year, anything that's 3 years old.
Would it be acceptable to say a minimum of 3 years?
I would first need to talk to town council, because I'm giving 3 years for professional negligence. as a matter of my understanding of the law, and I'm not a lawyer. But what's the point in going beyond 3 years?
But it's
Or what's the
harder.
point in going beyond our legal responsibility for keeping the records? We're expanding the scope of records and then saying we're going to keep them forever.
Well, I just said a minimum of 3 years.
Right, but that indicates that they enter into a fuzzy state after 3 years.
It means that it then becomes at the discretion and resources of the town to manage them at that point.
Jeff, right now, we're storing this where, in some drive or in the cloud somewhere, not in some sort of official official directory or something? Because certainly we have a number of audio and or video records to date.
Right, and they exist at the
town
whim
hall?
of Facebook.
Oh, was that right? Okay.
Or
Yeah.
YouTube or
YouTube.
YouTube, sorry.
So there's no organized
is-
approach right now. That it's some are there, some can't be found. It's very random.
And a goal we had was to make it more reliable.
Okay. Well, Eli's suggestion, 3, minimum of 3, but then it's at the discretion of the town because we can't predict capabilities to be able to formally delete this stuff. I agree. If the minutes are what legally we need to have and they're in perpetuity, that's enough.
so can I make a suggestion here? Besides the issue of perpetuity, there are a couple of other aspects to the proposed changes that I think are fairly relevant. And I guess I'd like to hear how board members feel about those. So in particular, overall, this was updated to deal with the technology shift from audio tapes to what we have nowadays. And then the second aspect was the previous policy was fixed on the Board of Selectmen, but we expanded it to the boards that have quasi-judicial functions. And I'm curious what board members think about both of those aspects.
I think it's a great idea.
So when you say quasi judicial, Eli, this is kind of you and Greg and Ann saying this is what makes sense, right?
No, those are the boards, which in fact have the ability to affect binding changes on individuals or property.
Okay.
All the other boards are advisory in nature, but these boards actually can alter your life.
Did everybody see Tiffany's comment?
Yep.
Okay, so you're asking for comments about the boards that have adjudication authority.
Yeah, it's definitely a change for them. In the past, they have not been required to record their meetings. And this would alter that.
So
Agreement with that. Sorry.
since we're doing something that impacts all those boards, do we want to seek their comments on this policy change?
Sure. With the understanding that it's still the Board of Selectmen's decision to make.
I understand that, but we've made decisions previously that have gotten a lot of pushback because they were made without any consultation with boards that were affected.
Well, this one's a little bit different because this one affects more about the generic process by which governmental process is executed in town. Whereas a lot of the places where we receive pushback in the past is when we have taken steps which actually specifically intrude onto the function of the board in areas where they typically have it's their domain that we are treading on. So for example, when we shift policy related to the beaches, and we do it without, if we do it without specifically and carefully involving Parks and Rec, we sometimes run into issues. So we have to be careful there because clearly we tread on other people's territory. But this is actually the exercise of regular government process, which is absolutely our territory.
But this would mean that all of those boards must record their meetings, video and audio, which is not something that they necessarily all are doing right now.
They're not.
Right now, they are doing it because everything's by Zoom.
Yes, that's
Well-
correct by default, but yes.
No, that's not true.
That's not true.
Those boards do not typically push the record button.
Okay.
Oh, I see. Right.
Some of them do. That's
Easily
correct.
done.
Yes. Yeah.
Are we shifting our archival records for these boards and the Board of Selectmen to video? Are we saying that we no longer, because there's state law around when minutes need to be posted from
No, you still have to do minutes. You still have to do minutes. You can't get around that. That's state law.
Nor is it our intention to get around minutes.
Well,
no. And just leave these video recordings? I have no intention of getting rid of minutes. Nor do I think, as Greg said, we can under state law.
That's what I said. We
Yeah, I don't-
have to have minutes. Minutes are the official record of a meeting.
Yeah.
But these recordings, the video recordings, are of value, and I think the group that wrote this thinks that it's of value to keep them.
I understand that, and I'm raising concerns that I have about the implications of that.
I don't understand the implications that you're finding.
And you just raised concerns about dispatch and internet connectivity. people's ability to access these records, when they can access them, how they can access them over time. I know that right now they are up, some of them are up on the website. The ones that do get recorded, but not all meetings are being recorded. This is a significant change in the way that we do record keeping. And what the Board of Selectmen would be saying by this change in policy is that we value the video recording of these meetings, not just as an object of interest, but as an important record to be kept of the proceeds of these boards. That's a significant change in policy.
Well, I actually won't argue with that. I agree it's a significant change in policy. But I would say that we've had that policy for the Board of Selectmen for quite a long time. In the form of this policy, we've specifically, we've always recorded the Board of Selectmen meetings. And for the past several years, we've done it with video as well, and under 1623 Studios. And before that, as Cape Ann Cable, they recorded those and put them up there, but they were essentially, we made them public. And I don't see why the other boards that have the ability to impact residents' lives should not do the same thing. I think it's a reasonable thing. And yeah, I would agree with you. It's a significant change in policy, but so what? I think it's an appropriate.
So what? Let me give you a so what from my point of view. If any of those decisions went to a court hearing, a judicial hearing outside of our judiciary responsibilities, adjudication responsibilities, and a document was missing, a video recording was missing, that could lead to a turnover in a decision. It becomes part, if it's something that the town thinks is valuable enough to keep in perpetuity, and somebody down the road says, where is the Board of Health video for such and such a date? And it wasn't recorded, or there was a problem with the equipment.
Jeff, we talked earlier about changing the in perpetuity issue to a minimum of 3 years.
Right. Well,
and I agree that this is something that should be reviewed by town council. But setting aside that issue of town council and the perpetuity, if you would moderate that position slightly, and do you still have the same concerns?
I do. And I understand the consideration that's been given to what I'm saying by putting in language that says for a minimum of 3 years. I just have a real issue with the standard that's being set for record keeping. And we can say written minutes are the standard. And the question can be raised, then why are you keeping video recordings of all these meetings?
Oh, I could go into a long discussion of why.
Becky.
Well, it's already policy for us to be keeping audio. So that's already in the policy.
For 1 year.
What this, But in any case, so we're not, that's one change, is just changing from voice or from audio to audio and video.
No, Becky, the policy is for 1 year, unless the board specifies that be kept longer.
Correct. But what we have here as a policy amendment is also, it's just the inclusion of the video, and then the time limits, and then the boards and committees. So I agree that if we're doing audio, we can do video as well. I think that it's very a judicious idea. My words. Anyway, I think it's prudent that other boards that have that are listed here should do as we do. My only issue I have is the as you stated, was the time constraint. I agree with the rest, or the time issue, but I agree with the rest of it. Can we poll the rest of the board? Just see where people are.
Can we see the rest of the policy?
Well, this is
That's-
87 too. That was it.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
So there should be a period after current.
And a period after public in that largest paragraph, I think. Yeah, 6 lines down in that paragraph. Before examples. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, and I think that the 3-year time period sounds okay to me, but I would want to take some advice from legal counsel about what their thoughts are on that idea. I also think that all of these boards should know this is what the proposal is that is on the table right now, that they are obligated to have both audio and video recordings of their meetings. And now that I think about it, and as Greg had intimated, I'll bet that many of them don't do that, at least not formally, to find out what their thoughts are. And that this is what our thinking is.
I would also raise a question about, in the first paragraph, the recordings will be stored in town hall.
Yep,
Is that a placeholder because
Because-
we're not sure? Or
no, a town hall is a place over which we have control. 1623 Studios goes out of business. Facebook decides it's boring. We lose control of the material.
There's other ways to store things in besides on Facebook and 1623. My concern is how much storage you're gonna need in town hall.
Almost
What's it gonna-
none.
What's it gonna
A
cost?
shoebox, a shoebox. Seriously. If you're talking about 3 years, it's a shoebox.
Yeah, that's actually accurate. If you want to propose a slight compromise there, you might say will be stored by the town. I don't know if that would be good enough for you, Ann.
Not particularly. We're talking about a small volume of material that should be under the control of the town, not some other organization.
It's a public
And-
record. Why does, what's the concerns over control? That somebody might modify it?
No, that somebody might just decide is boring and delete it.
Well, that would be in contradiction to this policy, should this policy become in effect.
But
Board of
our policy does not control
A third party.
any third party.
Which is what you're involved with if you go to the cloud.
Yep.
And do we have a cost for this policy?
I will try and find out what the cost for the policy would be. I
Okay,
can say that I have in my hand 80 gigabytes of storage for which I paid $10. And it came in a small envelope.
Eli, how much do you think, how many gigabytes do you think it takes for a 4-hour meeting? Video.
Depending on the compression, I would say.
Thank you.
What?
I was waiting to hear the word compression. But go ahead, depending on the compression.
I would say well under a gigabyte.
Okay, well, how do you want to proceed with this? Do you want to go to the second reading that we've talked about?
I think I can get the changes that we have talked about to you, Jeff, and ask you to communicate them to the boards that we've listed. And then I think we will be ready for a second reading, probably in 2 weeks, in whenever, February 3rd, February whatever.
Okay, I would like the word secure electronic archive. If it's going to be stored at town hall, I would, you know, I don't know that we're going to put specs into this proposal as a policy. But I would expect that it wouldn't be on a single flash drive chip, but it would be on a RAID drive that had multiple backups. Anything that's done on a computer can fail. One good power surge could wipe out your records.
I don't. First, we didn't say secure, we said appropriate, but
Yeah, I'm asking that it be a secure electronic archive. You're concerned about security. And I understand that concern, particularly when it comes to decisions that have been adjudicated in any of these boards, including our own. But a service system at town hall to keep these records, we just have to have redundant backups.
You see Tiffany's comment again?
So the answer is no, not really, because it's the website served by a service in the cloud. It's no different than us holding it.
It's served by an offsite server. But I'm also assuming that that's not the only place that it's uploaded into the website, but that's not the only place that the document's held. That it's held on a hard drive in a computer in town hall. So are we going to move this policy with the changes that we've noted? Do we need to vote on individual changes? How would you like to proceed?
I think personally, this one's got a fair amount of debate going on between board members, and there's still some question about a recommendation from town council. What I would recommend is that we hear from town council and then make whatever modifications we think we ought to make, and then propose it for a second reading at another meeting after this one.
So between now and our next meeting, we'll get the opinion of town council about the construction of this policy. And do our first full reading on February 7th. Is that what you're saying, Eli?
That is what I'm saying. Ann, are you good with that?
I think there is consensus that we should change permanently for a minimum of 3 years. And I suggest that I make that change before we send it to town council.
Agreed.
I would add at the end of make them available to the public through the public records request process.
Well,
Another question I have, Jeff, in that large paragraph, we say examples of such boards. Was the
Yeah.
discussion that those are examples, or in fact, those are the boards that we intend?
This this is actually good construction of policy language. So that you don't have to go back and amend the policy if there are other boards that come into existence that didn't exist previously, that have
Okay.
this kind of authority. So it gives a set of examples, and that on the basis of that, a legal opinion can be formed as to whether another board would have to also apply to follow this policy until the policy was amended.
Mhm.
So it's good construction of policy to write it that way. That's my opinion anyway.
Well, that
Greg,
may come back in the legal comment. There might be a legal comment on that. Curious.
maybe, yes. But Eli, you started to respond to what I said about through the public
Yeah.
records request process.
So if you specifically say it has to be through the public records request policy process, then we would not be posting these videos up on YouTube anymore. I think you should leave that out.
So are you going to post them on YouTube forever?
No.
Okay,
We said for a minimum of 3 years.
so we're going to post them on YouTube for 3 years.
We might. We would have the option of doing that.
Well, that's been the standard of public access to this point for these videos. Is that you can go to the website, go to the agenda page, and there is a little television set, and you select that button and you're on.
Okay.
So I don't think you could put a separate sentence in there that says, once archived, access may be through the public records request process. What my concern is here is, Eli, how long are we going to be relying on the internet and the website to hang on to these videos in the 3-year period?
So Anne had specifically stipulated that we hold them in town hall in appropriate electronic archives. And those would be the archive that would be guaranteed to be accessible. They'd be made of, and they could be made available to the public, and somebody could find them through a public records request. There's no reason that they also could not be available on YouTube.
Right.
That's not necessarily the medium which is guaranteed to be available by this policy, but it would be feasible to do so. But if we say in the policy that the method of access to it is through the public records request channel, then I think it implies that you're not going to make them regularly available, that you must do a public records request. And I think it's better to simply leave that off. Again, pending comment from town council.
Okay. As long as town council reviews it and says that language covers both website access. I just don't want people to say, well, why isn't this on the web? And because it's been taken down and it's in an archive. And you're going to have to ask for a public records request.
On a slightly different topic, I think the last sentence, if we are going to say for a minimum of 3 years, the last sentence is unnecessary.
I agree. And I was going to suggest that the wording of that be changed anyway to not tie it quite so much to technology, but I hadn't decided how to change it.
I don't think that that's necessary if they're stored on a RAID server, that's fine.
So is this horse in intensive care yet?
What's that?
I said, is this horse in intensive care yet? I was,
I think we're ready to autopsy the horse, actually.
going to propose that we move on to the next one.
All right. Let's keep going.
Move on. Let me just,
Let's do.
all references to permanent are a minimum of 3 years. Drop the last sentence. Send a copy with those changes to, you, Jeff, and the rest of the board and Greg, to be distributed to the other boards, the boards listed, and town council. Is that a correct summary of the board's feeling?
Does the board need the changes? I mean, they're right here and we'll see
Yes.
them.
Yes, I think everybody should see what we've talked about.
Well, before, okay.
I think we should see what's being forwarded to the other boards, the actual text. So yes, that's what we intended. Yes, Ann.
Okay, thank you very much.
I will blind copy our board on anything that I send out to the other boards. Nice work on going to active voice, Ann. Whoa. What's the cutoff for the annual report, Greg?
In terms of getting it printed,
Yes.
I mean, we go to the printer the first of 1st of March.
Any comments?
Yeah, Jeff, I have one. Just on the first bullet, I think we ought to say, not only for new policies, but and/or revisions. In subsequent bullets, it refers to the fact that they could be new policies or revisions, but right up front, it should be in probably the first sentence. So that people know this applies to both situations.
Okay, any board member, blah, 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 may initiate proposals for new or revised policies.
That's probably the most succinct. Such language would include, say,
I would separate them in.
Yeah.
New
Okay.
policies, new policies or revisions to existing policies.
Mhm. New policies. Or. Sorry. 88. Okay. Mhm.
Should the policies of the Board of Selectmen be distributed to members of all committees?
A lot of the policies don't actually affect members of the other committees. They should be made aware of them, but I don't think it's necessary that. I'd rather they be directed to policies that affect them as opposed to saying, hey, here's 100 policies you need to look at.
Yes, the other one is.
Can we see the appendix too?
Oh, yeah, sure. The listing of weeks was based on the idea that the Board of Selectmen meets weekly. And it just got. There's a schedule, but there isn't a deadline. So that's why we took the weeks out.
This also retains the notion that you cannot execute a policy or put in place a policy in one meeting. It takes a minimum of 3, I think.
3.
The only change I saw was under item 7, under the appendix A, and it's just
Oh, there's
where
a
it's
missing
that's
H.
it. That's it. That's it.
Oops.
It just isn't, I mean, there are a couple of other typos. There's a space before the period on policy at the end of that sentence and no space after it.
Yep. Sorry. Any other?
It's period after charge. No, up to the previous page.
Yeah.
Last sentence.
Ah.
Period after heads, department heads.
Mhm. Are we ready to move on to the next?
Can you go down to the timeline?
Mhm.
As long as we're addressing periods at the end of 4, is that a period that has been taken out that should not have been taken out? Because there's a period after everything else.
Yep.
There's no period there.
There is now.
Mhm.
Um, it's good.
Okay. So, I will add the proposed new policies or revisions to existing policies in the first sentence. And where it's talking about the annual report of the town. That probably should be annual report. I will add language that says that policies, new policies or significant policies that have been adopted in a calendar year will be published in the annual report of the town for that year.
Is it a calendar year or a fiscal year? That
The
It's calendar, well, most of it's calendar. The accounting financial reports are fiscal, but everything else is calendar.
Yeah, so but then you have the issue of the printing deadline. And, okay, so you run into this case of, well, the new policy or the change to the policy went into the annual report because you made a change in February, but now you can't make any changes to policies after March until after the town meeting or something ridiculous like that. It would be covered because it would go into the next annual report after that.
Right.
I think there's no point in saying calendar year or fiscal year here.
okay,
So Eli, if we pass on these policies that we're talking about tonight, would they go into this annual report?
Yeah.
I was thinking that instead they would go into the annual report for 2022, which comes out in late March of 23.
It's a long time.
Why would they not go in ahead of time? Why would they not go into this one if we could print them reasonably and if we adopted them before the printing date of this year's annual report?
So again, it normally is the calendar year. That's what most reports are following.
Is that a practice that has been followed in the past? I know most of these policies go way back. But have we actually in fact published them, I guess, as it's gone on 10 and 15 years ago? Who knows?
We haven't, this is something that has not been happening of late.
Okay, just curious.
Well, all right. I don't really care all that much a year.
I
Basically,
think
if there are changes in the space of a year, you'll hear about them in the annual report.
So
I would hate to-
the cutoff is December 31st.
Yep. I'm fine with that.
So we asked people to put their annual reports together in January, and we collect them by early February, assemble it all and get it to the printer by the 1st of March. So that's the timeline we're under.
Right. Yeah.
I wonder if on the Board of Selectmen website, we could have updates.
Sure. Yeah.
Because we're going through this major revision of all, review of all the policies. Whether we couldn't just put them up on the website and then formally do it in the annual report for anything that we passed this year. I mean, have we passed any policies in the past year in 2021?
Yes.
we changed how we did the stickers. That was a policy change.
But it's not a formal,
No, we did.
That's a practice change.
that's a practice, not a policy. Yeah.
Hang on. What did we do? This is embarrassing.
That's just-
'Cause we haven't
that's a-
finished the policy on exit interviews, which was started in September. And I can't think of a policy that we did prior to that.
Website policy.
Thank you, Eli. The website policy.
I knew it was going to be embarrassing when I found it.
And that was adopted in like June or
2020.
July, right?
No, it was
January, I think.
November of 20. No, I don't know when it was adopted. That's when I last scribbled on this particular document.
I have a note it was January of 21.
Yeah, that sounds right. Because the first reading would have been at or around the time I wrote the initial note. Yep.
Okay. So are we good moving this on to a second reading with the changes that Ann's called out?
Yep, this is 88-1, right?
Yes.
I'll make a motion that we place 88, policy 88, revisions for policy 88-1 on our next agenda.
Second,
Roll call vote. Mr. Round,
Yes,
Mr. Bowling,
Yes,
Ms. Jakes,
yes,
Ms. Harrison,
Yes,
Mr. Bob Turner votes yes. Okay, we have the consent agenda, the town administrator's report, and an executive session left. So I'd like to stop here.
postpone. Yes,
Stop here and move on to, so you've got town council done.
Mhm.
And that's the last one, right?
yes,
Of this
yes.
batch.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for the work you guys put in on this.
You're very welcome.
Very much appreciated.
It certainly makes me more comfortable moving toward having policies that we actually believe in.
And well, hopefully the future generations of boards will believe in as well. But policies that are written clearly and are relevant to the practices that we engage in town government today. So. On the consent agenda, we only had minutes for December 6th.
Yes,
Okay, so on our agenda, it says December 20th. And we're obviously going to hold those over until February 7th. We have a set of license renewals, and there was a late entry on the list for the board that came in earlier today. We have the documents for the change of manager of Antique Table and a reserve fund transfer request that Greg described in his notes. Yes, I did read that. It's a request for $25,000 to be transferred to workers' compensation, which has a present balance of $10,375.06. And this is to cover invoices that are outstanding, which we have to pay and then get reimbursed for from the insurance. So this was brought up last time, and we wanted to get it clear what it was being used for. And that's the clarity that we needed, or that's, I'm hoping the clarity that we needed. So are there any holds on the consent agenda other than the December 20 minutes? I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so moved by Becky and seconded by Eli. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling,
Yes.
Mr. Bodmer Turner votes yes. Town administrator's report.
Okay, I can be brief. So making very good progress finally on the compost contract and discussion with the vendor, Black Earth, regarding design of the facilities and getting clarity on some of the modifications that they would like to pursue. We're very close. We're just starting to finalize, I believe, and we should have that ready for your final approval at your February 7th meeting. So some of the discussions that we had regarding those modifications and potentially sticking with the original and dollars, that I believe is not necessary, and that Black Earth will be providing their engineer stamp and certification of any modifications. Our engineer will do a review of that, and we are pretty comfortable with that process moving forward. In terms of the contract itself, some areas, again, not major areas that got cleaned up. And again, those final verbiage is being put together, and it should be ready for your approval at your next meeting. We should be able to get to you the revised draft, which won't be that much different from the one you saw previously, but it will have those areas that were questioned and or redlined. Those will be cleaned up. Hopefully we'll get that to you certainly a week in advance, if not more, from your February 7th meeting. So hopefully you'll see that at the sometime next week.
Thank you very much, Greg, to you and Chuck and our intrepid town engineer, as well as Andrew and the folks from Black Earth for getting this done. I know it's been a slog, and we appreciate the due diligence that was done on both sides.
Good. Okay. Yes. Hats off to DPW, Chuck and Nate in particular, and to Andrew and his team.
Yeah.
So that's where we are with that. Unless there's any other questions, we'll save that for final approval for the 7th.
Andrew, did you want to make a comment? Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Greg.
No, that's fine. So at last at the planning board meeting, there was a preliminary presentation made for a new research lab with a biolab campus on lands beyond where the MAC is. This is cell signaling technology, CST, founded by a Manchester resident, Michael Kuhn, and they are seeking to create a new campus on lands, as I say, just beyond the MAC where the old quarry lies. So it'd be taking some lands that are pretty barren right now and transforming them into a new use. In order for that project to go forward, there is the need for amending the LCD. Otherwise, it would have to be through a variance process. But the preferred route certainly is to seek voter approval for some changes to our zoning in that area in the LCD. Interestingly enough, the use is allowed in the western LCD, if I can use that phrase. So areas off of Pine Street allow bio research labs, but the eastern LCD does not. And this is a preferred location up past the MAC. So just a heads up that we'll be hearing more about this in the coming weeks. The proponent would like to attend your meeting on the 7th to present a more in-depth overview of the project. As I say, it's a campus. They're expanding. They have facilities in Peabody and Danvers, I believe. And this would be a third campus for them, up to, I believe, around 200 employees what they're contemplating. So again, FYI, this will be coming more formally before you at your next meeting for information and an ability to ask some questions about the project, but wanted to give you a heads up that that is coming. Thirdly, just on COVID, again, we continue to keep our fingers crossed that Omicron is going to start waning. I certainly hope that it is. We have secured rapid tests that we are providing to all staff, making available to folks who live in the housing authority apartments, making available to folks who participate in our Meals on Wheels program, and also making it available to local businesses for their staff, and hoping to get those distributed in the next week or so. In addition to that, we're following federal news. If you can find it at a local retailer, your insurance company would reimburse you for that, or perhaps in a week or so, you'll be able to do it without any out-of-pocket funds. But of course, you have to find them at the stores or online. The third option is people can order them through a new federal website. I believe it's 4 kits per household that you're allowed to order. I believe starting Wednesday, if not sooner. So that's another avenue to obtain the rapid tests. So in terms of our numbers in town, they are not growing at a rapid rate. We seem to be stabilized and dropping just a bit, I think, in terms of new cases. So that's good. We're not seeing a continual climb. And obviously the mask mandate is still in place, as it is in most communities all around us. And we continue to do fairly well for town staff. We've certainly had more cases with Omicron than we did with Delta or the previous variants, but we're not doing too badly. And fortunately, folks who have come down with it, the cases have been mild, and so we're not seeing the severe stress that certainly the Delta variant caused. So that's good news. So that's where we are with COVID. I just wanted to give you that update. Any questions there? So moving on, lastly, as you recall, as part of the local rapid recovery program for businesses, we did that initial report. You advanced, one of the elements that you wanted to advance was a placemaking and wayfinding effort. And we have identified a grant potential to fund that through the Travel and Tourism Agency of the state. They are offering grant funds for placemaking and wayfinding. And so the deadline is tomorrow. And Sue Brown and Sue Croft have been working on that. And assuming that you are agreeable, would have a letter of support from you as a board in that grant application, saying that you support the grant. It's a joint grant between us and Essex. We would split the proceeds, hire a consulting firm, and that firm would help both communities with the placemaking and wayfinding program, a plan of action, and then we would be able to use some of our ARPA money to implement those elements. So in addition, we are identifying some funding that we could use for some help to put together some new special events this spring as a more immediate effort, as well as looking at some funding sources to support the public restrooms that the Downtown Improvement Committee is working on, talking to some merchants and trying to identify a good strategy for this coming summer season. And so that's a quick update on where we are with the rapid recovery and the follow-up.
Greg, who will be coordinating the grant for the placemaking study after it's submitted?
So that would be through Sue Brown's auspices. She would be staff who would lead that, and working with with DIP, the Downtown Improvement, and with the business community. And then there would be public forums as well, and would love input from various boards and committees as their interest dictates.
Thank you.
So that's what I had for this evening.
Any questions from the board?
Not very relevant, but we succeeded in ordering the COVID tests this morning.
Oh, that is good news.
As did I. I think it goes through USPS.com. That's what the link led us to.
Yeah, actually, Tiffany put the link up on the town website as well for that.
And you're able to obtain those for free through your insurance?
No, through the government, per
That's-
household, and they'll deliver them after the middle of the year of this month. Or at some point, we'll see.
That's pretty fast response for government. God, we can't even get a policy done that time.
It
Okay,
remains to be seen if we actually get it then.
please keep us updated. I have no other matters that have not been anticipated by the chair. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session under Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to pending litigation and contract negotiations,
And not to return to open meeting.
and not to return to open meeting.
So moved.
Second,
Roll call vote. Mr. Boland,
yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
and Ms. Jakes.
Yes. And just a
Fine.
reminder, stop the recording.
Thank you. And I would say that the chair also votes yes. It's a unanimous vote. Good night, all. Brittany, you don't have to stay for this.